Hello everyone, it's Dini here. As we all know, Ubisoft announced what they call the major reset, and that wording is not exaggerated. It's a full rethink of how Ubisoft wants to make games going forward, at least on paper. But on the practical side, there are a lot of things that seems just a consolidation of all their philosophies, just more strictly interpreted now. And since Assassin's Creed sits right at the center of this reset, it's worth breaking down what's actually changing and what it could mean for the future of the series. I have decided to not do witch hunts or to be upset. The situation is not optimal and I'm not personally really happy with this situation. But I also understand that Ubisoft is doing its interest to avoid worse conditions in the future into a world context where finding jobs is not an easy task. These changes are extremely negative right now for thousands of developers, but as of now, there is a slight chance that in the long run they will get better, since continuing into the path we have seen until the last year will bring into more serious consequences for Ubisoft itself. I'll go through the announcement step by step, read the key points and comment on them as we go. So first, Ubisoft says this: the new operating model will be structured around 5 created houses. In simple terms, Ubisoft is trying to clean up its internal structure. Instead of dozens of studios all connected in complicated ways, they're grouping their main brands into 5 large units, called creative houses. Each one has its own leadership and its own responsibilities. This is Ubisoft admitting that the old system had become too slow and too hard to manage. They are hinting at the fact that this will regain to creative freedom inside each creative houses. Well, it's not really like this, or at least potentially yes. On the practical side, it's a double-edged word for creatives, since the next point stated, they will combine game development and go-to-market functions. This is actually more important than it sounds, because for a long time, the people making the games and the people selling the games weren't always on the same page. Now they're part of the same unit. So the same group decides what the game is, who is for, and how it's going to be supported. If this works, it should reduce those situations where a game feels like it was designed on one way but monetized or marketed into another one. But at the same time, it means that the CEOs and the marketing responsible of each house have power also into the creative side. So this may potentially mean that a creative director, more than before, has to be careful in making choices that wouldn't be profitable for the house, since if there is a failure, each house pays the dues, not Ubisoft itself as a company. This means that the CEO of a house can easily reject bold ideas, ambitious projects from the beginning, because they are not profitable. Do you remember Serge Asquith? Yeah, it reminds me of this situation. Now he is gone, but this approach will allow to more people like him to have a word into a creative decision. For example, like what kind of protagonist should it be, what type of setting, for example. As far as Vantage Studio, the CEO responsible for that is Charlie Guillemot, the son of Yves, famous for NFTs and microtransaction policies into other jobs he had, so do what you want with this information. Ubisoft also says they will be shaped in distinct creative gen. Basically, Ubisoft is done with the idea that every studio can jump between genres whenever needed. Each creative house focuses on a specific type of experience. That means teams can build real expertise over time instead of constantly resetting, but it basically makes the game more serialized and create less room for creatives for doing their job, so to innovate. For Assassin's Creed, this matters because the series has often felt pulled in too many directions at once, but if the new Assassin's Creed responsible after Kote will not be someone that understands the core pillars of the franchise, for example like Jean Guzan did after AC3 with Black Flag, he understood the core pillars and he made great games like Black Flag, like Origins. If instead we have, let's say, Jonathan Dumont, we may see a return of big RPG games full of looting and stats and all stuff you need to boost microtransactions without caring about the quality of the stories and the history of the franchise. Then there is this line: they will have full financial ownership. Like I was saying, each creative house is now directly responsible for its own performance. If something underperforms, there is no hiding behind the rest of the company. For Assassin's Creed, this means more pressure, but also clearer priorities. The series, it's one of the main things holding Ubisoft together, a billionaire-worthy product. This means that they expect that each Assassin's Creed game makes cash, and this also means that the developers will get heavy pressure like never before and the schedules might be longer. But at the same time, if the teams will not find a common solution about philosophies and ideas and how to monetize those, the project may be cancelled directly. This of course is terrible for creativity. Then, core services will provide shared, standardized services. This part is about efficiency. Ubisoft is centralizing engines, online systems, analytics, all the technical backbone. Creative teams don't have to rebuild the same tools every time. It's the kind of change that can actually prevent messy launches, like they did for Unity. And after Shadows build the engine, for example, they can use that improvements and bring it in the next games without too money spending on them. But we already saw that during the BAFTA, Kote said the same thing, so he was just repeating some Yves Guillemot ideas. Now we're getting to the real bad news, in my opinion: the return on-site work. The group intends to return to 5 days per week on site. This is one of the most controversial choices. Basically, the employees will not receive the right of a certain amount of days during the week for remote work anymore, but they will have the concession of a certain amount of days into remote work during the year. So the employers will have to manage themselves with limited days of remote work. This can potentially create bad practices and possibly abuses by the higher ups, because on one hand you are let free to choose when you work from home, on the other hand your bosses will notice who works always on site and who works on remote and will take note. Apart from that, there can be easily and potentially clauses for cutting wages in some conditions, since the workers can't unionize, as we've seen from the closure of the Halifax studio. This idea is written like, oh, we're creating a tight family always in contact, like it makes people more productive, but let alone that this is not true. If you give people a fair amount of days per week at home, people will work into a better shape and mood. And once they go and work on site, they are even more productive because they are less tired. But let alone that, this also means that people that could afford to work at Ubisoft thanks to remote work, maybe because they're not close to the workplace, now will be forced to leave. So a lot of people will lose their job. And this sucks, and it's one of the worst decisions of this document, since it gives more duties, it gives more responsibilities. In exchange, it gives less rights. I can imagine that the employers may be pissed for that, a lot. Nonetheless, the idea that Ubisoft believes that a workplace is better when teams are physically together fits with the idea of a tighter control and clearer communication that the document is trying to make us understand once and for all. Now let's talk about the creative houses themselves, because this is where Assassin's Creed really comes in. We have the Creative House 1 Vantage Studio that Ubisoft describes as focused on scaling and extending Ubisoft's largest franchises. So this is where Assassin's Creed lives. Alongside Far Cry and Rainbow Six, Assassin's Creed is now officially one of the core pillars of the company. These are the brands expected to deliver long-term, reliable results. For Assassin's Creed, that likely means fewer random experiments and more structured long-term planning and more strictness. So Creative House 2 is focused instead on competitive and cooperative shooters experiences, and an interesting name here is Splinter Cell. And this suggests that Ubisoft want to handle it carefully, not rush it and not treat it like a mass market release compared to Assassin's Creed, Far Cry and Rainbow Six. Then we have Creative House 3 that is about live service games, and so this means that Ubisoft is not trying to run dozens of live games anymore. They're choosing a small number and committing them to long term. One example is Skull and Bones. This links with the idea that Ubisoft will focus now with open world adventures and game as a service experiences. In my opinion, differently from a lot of rumors that I've heard, I think that this time they will divide the two experiences. The game as a service is one thing, and the open world adventures maybe communicate with this system, but they are not part of it. I will give you an example that I will return to later. Assassin's Creed Hexe is not a game as a service maybe, or maybe it has elements of it inside it with the Animus Hub, but maybe Invictus will have this game as a service experience since it's a multiplayer game. But we don't know, of course. I will return to that in more details later. For now, let's focus on Creative House 4. This house includes Prince of Persia, Rayman and Beyond Good and Evil, and it's focused on narrative and fantasy worlds. And this is where one of the biggest changes has come, because Ubisoft has cancelled the Sands of Time Remake, and this is a big signal. It shows that even a well-known brand isn't safe if the project doesn't meet internal standards of quality. So nostalgia and passions alone are not enough. And also because the Prince of Persia Sands of Time Remake was a big thing, and they cancelled it because probably it didn't meet expectations. Then there is the Creative House 5, is for casual and family games, and these games are consistent performers and helps to stabilize the rest of Ubisoft business. Then they don't get much attention, but at the end of the day they are some experience for all people, like Just Dance, for example. Now we go into the other part. So we have the portfolio refocus and cancellations. Ubisoft says 60 games have been discontinued. 3 of those were new IPs. That tells you a lot about how difficult it is right now to launch something new in the AAA space. Ubisoft is choosing to focus on fewer projects that it believes can actually succeed. It's a safer solution, but it also means less room for experimentation. One of those games is the already mentioned Prince of Persia remake, but also a mobile game which is unclear if Assassin's Creed Jade, but that's my opinion, it is not, because the document talks about an unannounced project. My take is that it was a mobile game under development of the Halifax studio, who was responsible in the past for AC Rebellion already, while Jade is not even a proper Ubisoft game but a Tencent game. Another key point is about the delays. Additional development time will be allocated to 7 games. This is Ubisoft that is trying to avoid rushed release. Delays don't guarantee quality, but they do reduce the risk of obvious problem at launch, technically. I say technically because Ubisoft can easily delay a game launch if they see that the game is not up to expectations, and eventually if the game keeps being not enough to be cancelled, like the POP remake. I say this because the document mentions that unannounced project that was meant to go out during 2026 fiscal year has been postponed to the 2027 fiscal year. This game seems to be Black Flag Racing, according to rumors that I suggest you to take with a grain of salt. If the rumors are true, this means that Black Flag Racing was not enough for Guillemot at the current state to be released in 3-4 months' time. Maybe they are not happy with how things are going. This means, in my opinion, that whatever this project is has the same risk to be eventually cancelled if the expectations remain not fulfilled. That's the sad reality. As of now, it's unclear if ACX has received more time to develop or not. Ubisoft don't mention the postponed games, so there are chances that Hexe may arrive this year, since apparently they have hired Christopher Grilly as lead scriptwriter with a different studio, always regarding Hexe. This may mean that they are already watching for DLCs and post-launch content, so the game seems to be into a good state enough to start caring about what is happening after the launch. Christopher Grilly worked on Valhalla's DLC and Mirage. My personal hope are that Bordeaux Studio is working on DLCs, since that studio is out of Vantage, and this means that they have nothing to do with Assassin's Creed obviously, but maybe they're still working as a support studio. Let's see. In any case, Hexe seems safe. If it will be out in 2026, it will likely receive a boost on post-launch content and microtransactions to capitalize on with it. There are also chances that if the unannounced project is Black Flag Racing, that if it will come out at the end of 2026 instead of 2027, Hexe will be launched at 2027. This may mean more time to work on it, but also we don't know if the new management will ask for shake things up with the formula of the game and make it bigger. Some rumors even talks about Black Flag released in 2027, so Hexe in 2028, but honestly I don't trust rumors, so in my opinion we know nothing about AC Hexe except that it is in a good stage for development apparently. We don't know if Black Flag Racing exists, we don't know when Invictus will be ready. As of now, Hexe and Invictus are the only two certainly for the franchise, and it may easily be that one project will be released this year and Invictus may be released the next year if Black Flag is not out, or directly in 2028, and opening up the new era of Vantage in this way, since Invictus is the multiplayer project that can boost microtransactions and can give a tons of money for the foreseeable future, just like GTA Online did. This will permit to the AC brand to breathe and to have less pressure, since in one hand they had the cash cow with online and skins and game as a service native experiences with Invictus, and on the other hand they can make open world Assassin's Creed games that doesn't automatically mean big open world RPG, but maybe more focused projects, maybe even smaller, but with more budget and more risks. I'm confident that for Assassin's Creed, we can expect a better future compared to the other brands. Now we talk about cost cuts and studio closures. Acceleration of cost reduction initiatives means that studios are closing, teams are being restructured. It's about basically making Ubisoft sustainable. Ubisoft is shrinking to regain control. This practice is widely common in Europe. Companies need to be more sustainable, so they need to make austerity policies. Ubisoft is not a US company, is not based into an empire with a nationalist leader that wants to boost and protect their own companies. It's a French-Canadian company, so it's a decentralized company with a lot of studios and depends on the economical situation of Europe and Canada. So, if the economic system is doing bad because people like Trump is actively sabotaging not USA companies and summoning other countries like Europe, this has implications also into Ubisoft. EA, Microsoft, Sony America can survive easily because US has an insane amount of patrons and incentives. Canada also have incentives on video gaming industry, but not on the scale of a United States gaming company like Microsoft. It's easier for indie companies, maybe in Canada, to survive despite being small. Now that Ubisoft is a big company though, they have to deal with competition and also dirty practices. So, austerity policies are sadly useful for making the company look smaller and to restart again. This means that Ubisoft will have bad finances now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will continue to this path. At the opposite, it's likely that in the long run they will avoid what they were risking with the older management model. This, though, don't avoid a bloodshed when it comes with normal employees' jobs, which are the real victims on this situation. Despite understanding the geopolitical reasons on why Ubisoft is doing that, I personally stand with developers' needs. These changes in Ubisoft have been done with a scarce transparency. Developers weren't even properly aware of what was going on with their company. If they are pissed and will protest, I will support them. Ubisoft needs to do compromise to avoid major layouts, at least when it comes with working conditions. But it's likely that Guillemot wants to lay out to reduce costs, and that sucks. So, what does all of this mean for Assassin's Creed? The series isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's more important than ever to Ubisoft. But it will also be more controlled, more planned and more carefully managed. We'll probably see fewer experimental releases and more long-term roadmaps, at least until they find a way to make money and to be in a better shape. The real question is whether Assassin's Creed can still evolve creatively under this structure, or if it becomes too safe. This reset won't magically fix Ubisoft overnight, that's for sure. Until 2028, I doubt we'll see major changes about production. Whether this leads to better Assassin's Creed games depends less on the structure itself though, but more on the people leading the franchise now. That's where the future of the series will really be decided.